Ever wonder how some companies, they become like these big names, everyone knows them, and then poof, gone.
Yeah, it's like a tale as old as time in the business world. And actually, it's something we're going to dig into today using this TED Talk by Knut Haanaes.
Oh, this is going to be good. We've got his insights, plus a bunch of other business minds we're going to be pulling from today, like putting together the clues, right?
Exactly. So Haanaes, he's all about what makes organizations tick, what makes them truly great. And he says the real trick is this balance.
Balance.
Yeah, between getting really good at what you're already doing, but also like keeping an eye out for the next big thing.
It's like walking a tightrope, kinda.
Perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And he talks about these strategy traps, basically, things that can really trip companies up, even if they're doing well otherwise.
All right, so trap number one, he calls it the competency trap. Sounds kind of harmless when you say it like that.
Right. But it's sneaky. Think about it. You're at the top of your game. Business is booming. Why change anything?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what I always say.
I hear you. But here's the thing. While you're busy being great at what you do, the world keeps spinning. And if you're not paying attention, you miss what's new, what's next. That's when that competency trap gets you.
And like the perfect example, right? Kodak. What happened there? They were huge.
Exactly. They were the name in photography, but they were so focused on being the best at film, at getting that perfect picture.
They missed the whole digital thing coming along.
Totally. They were stuck in their lane, so busy perfecting what they were already good at. They didn't see the bigger picture shifting around them.
So basically, too comfy, too successful to realize things were changing.
Ouch. Exactly. And what if they'd used all that knowledge, all that expertise, to get ahead of the game with digital? It's kind of a cautionary tale.
For sure. So competency trap is all about clinging to what you know. So this other one, the novelty trap, that's got to be like the opposite then.
100%. It's like that friend who always has a new idea, a new project, but never actually finishes anything.
No, I know that friend. Fun at parties, maybe not so much for running a business.
Exactly. And for companies, that's the novelty trap in action. Jumping on every trend, spreading themselves too thin, and then they kind of lose sight of who they are, what they were building in the first place.
So we've got these two traps, sticking with what you know or chasing every new idea that comes along. And honestly, neither one sounds like a recipe for success. So like, what actually happens when companies fall into these traps? What are the real world consequences?
Well, one of the biggest and most immediate impacts is on cash flow. Robert Kiyosaki, he's the rich dad, poor dad guy. He had this great quote, "The number one reason for business failure is cash flow." And these traps, both of them, they can really mess with a company's cash flow if they're not careful.
Makes sense. I mean, imagine pouring tons of money into some unproven idea or like being so slow to adapt that you miss out on new technology. It sounds like a quick way to drain your resources.
Exactly. And it's not just hypothetical. Think about Blockbuster. They were the place to rent movies, right? But they totally missed the boat when it came to how people were actually consuming entertainment.
Yeah.
They were so stuck on those physical stores, they basically dismissed mail-order DVDs and then streaming. They thought it was just a fad.
Ouch. They really bet on the wrong horse there, huh? So they were so focused on their existing business model that they missed the boat on the whole digital revolution, even with all the resources and the brand recognition they had to be a major player.
Exactly. They clung to their old way of doing things, that competency, and it ultimately led to their downfall. And then on the other hand, you've got Netflix. They saw the potential, saw how things were changing, and they adapted. Became the streaming giant we know now. They really embody what Haanaes is talking about, that balance between exploiting what's working and exploring new avenues.
So they were smart about it, didn't just abandon what was working for them completely, but also weren't afraid to try new things.
Right. And that brings up another really important factor in all of this, planning. Brian Tracy, he's a big name in the personal and professional development world, he said. Failing to plan means planning to fail. And that's so true when it comes to these traps, these pitfalls.
So it's not enough to just recognize them. You have to actively plan to avoid them.
Exactly. Companies need a strategy, a roadmap, that lets them use their existing strengths, those core competencies, but also allows them to dedicate time and energy to exploring new ideas, new markets, all while the world keeps changing around them.
Finding that sweet spot between sticking with what you know and, venturing out into the unknown, But I'm curious, how do we actually take these big business ideas, these traps, and make them relatable, something we can all learn from, whether we're running a Fortune 500 company or, just trying to navigate our own careers?
That is the million-dollar question, and it's actually why these traps are so fascinating. They're not just limited to the business world. Think about it. Haven't we all experienced these traps, these tendencies, in our own lives in some way?
You mean like that time I refused to give up my flip phone even when everyone else had moved on to, like, the first iPhone? Okay, maybe bad example, but I get what you mean.
Well, maybe, but think about it this way. How many of us get stuck in our own little competency traps? Maybe you're amazing at your job, you're the go-to person, you're comfortable, you're good at what you do.
You're in your comfort zone, and sometimes it feels good to be there.
Right. But just like for those big companies, the world keeps changing. And if we're not careful, we might not be ready for those changes. And then we miss out on opportunities.
And it's not just about our careers either, right? Like, think about that, friend. Always on to the next big thing, the next book, the next diet, never really sticks with anything. That's kind of the novelty trap playing out in real life.
Totally. We get so caught up in chasing the shiny new thing, we forget about, actually getting good at something, mastery of the basics.
Right, so how do we actually find that balance between getting stuck and spreading ourselves too thin?
Well, I think it starts with looking inward a bit, like really understanding our strengths, maybe even more importantly, our weaknesses. What are we really good at? What do we actually enjoy doing? And on the flip side, what are we doing that maybe isn't working?
Like a personal inventory. What's working, what's not, what needs to change.
Exactly. And once we have that picture, then we can be smarter about where we put our energy, our focus. Let's say writing is your thing, but you're also interested in tech. Maybe there's a way to combine those. Explore technical writing, something like that.
Or if you're like a super organized person, but you're juggling a million projects, maybe it's time to simplify. Focus on just a few things that really matter.
That's it right there. It's about aligning what we do with what we value. But we have to be honest with ourselves. Do we tend to cling to the familiar? Or are we always chasing the next new thing?
Recognizing those patterns and then actually making a conscious choice to, do something different.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's really powerful about all of this. It's not about being paralyzed by fear or not trying anything new. It's about making choices in work and in life, but with that self-awareness and a willingness to adapt and learn.
Finding that sweet spot, right, between being really good at something and being open to new possibilities so we thrive.
Exactly. And, by understanding these traps and really making an effort to avoid them, who knows what we can achieve, both in our careers and in our personal lives.
I love that. So much good stuff to think about today. The ups and downs of these big companies, but then also there's very human tendencies, the things we all do. So as you go about your week, think about these strategy traps and ask yourself, where are they showing up in your own life? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it?
Because at the end of the day, it's about becoming the best version of ourselves.
Right.
For ourselves and for everyone around us.
Perfectly said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep learning, and keep exploring.